Today, my Jeep is getting a bit of an upgrade. We are installing a Metalcloak lift kit on it. It's the 2.5-inch JL Sport Dual Rate Edition. I think I got all that. Kevin has installed one of these before. He installed a 3.5-inch lift on his Jeep, same brand. And so he has a little experience with it. He's hoping it's only going to take a day. He's going to start working on it early. If the weather cooperates, he should be able to get it done. It's supposed to be nice today. It rained all night. As you can see, it's pretty wet right now, but it should be clearing up. I'm excited. Now, when we first got this Jeep, it has come down about 3 inches with the build. All the weight that we put on it, including the camper top and the awning and the running boards, everything we've added to the Jeep has brought it down about 3 inches. So we're hoping with the 2.5-inch lift and the stronger springs, it should get it back up to at least stock height. So we'll know when we're done. So he's going to be doing most of the work, and I'm just going to be here for support.
Okay, as Cindy said, we are getting ready to install a 2.5-inch lift on her Jeep. It is the 2.5-inch Metalcloak Dual Rate Rock Sport Edition. Now I've got everything laid out, and this is for the front right here. We've got the upper control arms, the front coil springs, and then we're going to put some wheel spacers on, and then it also comes with a track bar. We get the upper spring pad mounts, and then the outboard shock mounts that goes in the front. And then for the rear, we get a track bar, the extended sway bar links, and then these are spacers for the sway bar, and then the rear coils, and then we're also going to put some wheel spacers in. Now, a couple of things we don't need for right now is the front quick disconnect sway bar links, because she has the auto links quick disconnect on her Jeep, so we're going to reuse those. Of course, they give you a bunch of stickers. And then the bump stops for the upper wheel motion. But I think because of the size tire she has, we're not going to worry about that too much. We'll take it out and test it and see. I know when I first installed the lift on my Jeep, I installed the same lift but a 3.5. When I had these same tires, I had way more fender clearance than I needed. But now that I've got the 35s on mine, I installed the bump stops. Like I said, we'll test it and see if she's going to need the bump stops.
What we did was we went through and marked at this edge right here on this stick the height on the passenger side and the driver's side. So when we're done, we'll be able to compare the difference in height.
Now I've got the instructions here. Metalcloak does a good job of providing well-written instructions, easy to follow. So I'm just going to start on step 1 and move through them. This will be my actual third Metalcloak lift. I installed the one on my Jeep, and then I helped a friend with his lift on his Jeep, and then now I'm doing Cindy. So this will be actually the third Metalcloak lift that I've installed. They're relatively straightforward, and I'm hoping it's only going to take me the day, and we'll get going on it. First, I'm going to start by jacking it up, place some jack stands underneath to make it secure, and then remove the front wheels, and then start on step 1. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start installing the lift is install these wheel spacers. These are the TerraFlex 1.75-inch wheel spacers. I have these on my Jeep also, and they've been on there for a little over 2 years now, and I've had no issues with them. They work really well. So the wheel spacers are installed, and one thing I wanted to mention is when you buy the wheel spacers, buy a known brand. Don't buy the cheap knockoffs. It's important to make sure you get a hub-centric wheel spacer. It's going to have the lip for your wheel to ride on, and then also it's got the groove inside for the wheel hub to ride on as well. So I'm ready to move on to the first step, and according to the instructions, I am going to remove the front sway bar links, and then I'm also going to disconnect the brake line brackets. So on Cindy's Jeep, we've already switched out the sway bar links with these auto links, and we did a video on that. You can go back and check it out. So I'm just going to loose the bottom of the sway bar up, and then just push these up out of the way. And then when we're done, we'll adjust the length of them and reconnect them. And one thing I like to do is put all the hardware back where it goes so I don't misplace it or have to try to look for it later. So the other thing we need to do is remove this brake line bracket from the brake line. So we need to pry that off of there because we're no longer going to use this bracket. Okay, so I've got the upper brake line bracket loose. I removed the lower brake line bracket and got it off the brake line. Next, I'm going to remove the track bar, the shocks, and then the springs. So I have the axle down to full droop. It's going to make it easy to pull these stock springs out. All these lines are nice and loose, so I don't have any real tension on them. This should slide right out, hopefully. Okay, the next step is removing the heat shields that cover the upper control arm where it mounts to the frame. So that's what I'm going to do next. We want to save all that because we'll be putting it back on once we replace the control arm with the new one. And there's the bolt we're trying to get to right there. Now I'm going to go remove the heat shield on the other side. So I'm not sure what this is right here, but it's keeping me from being able to get this bolt out for the upper control arm. So I'm just going to loosen, there it goes. I'm just going to loosen this nut right here and see if I can move that out of the way temporarily and get the bolt out. There's actually two bolts holding it on. There's another one right up here. I'm going to take that one out and see if I can move it out of the way. Okay, I managed to wiggle that out of the way enough to get the bolt out. Don't remember struggling with that on my Jeep, but I have the same motor, so it must be there. I don't remember it. But I got the bolt out and I'm moving on to the next step. So they have a flag knot on the back of this control arm, but it doesn't catch anything. But it did help me get it loose at least with the impact driver. I'm going to slide this original hardware back in here. Should have went up with this. There we go. Now I'll put this hardware back in. So that's the control arm for the passenger side. And now I'm going to work on getting the control arm out for the driver's side. And we'll be ready to start the install at that point. Alright, so that completes the removal of all the stock parts. You can see I got the two coils, the shocks, the upper control arms, and the front track bar. And now we're ready to start installing the new parts. So the first step is I'm going to install the upper control arms. and I'm going to set them at the same length as the stock length. For the 3.5 inch lift, they say to put them at, I don't remember, 19 3/4. Stock is 20 1/4. But we're only doing the 2.5 inch lift, so I believe I'm going to set it at 20 1/4. So the quickest way to set that length is I'm going to put the Metalcloak on top of the stock. We'll put a bolt in there, and then I'm going to adjust it until these holes line up. I'm not quite there yet, so I need to probably give it a half a turn and see what we can do. Okay, so I spun the adjustment out, and now these holes line up perfectly. So I know I'm the same length as the factory control arms. I'm just going to adjust that nut right there and lock it in place, and it'll be ready to install. I got the upper control arms installed. Metalcloak doesn't list any torque specs on their instructions, but I looked it up, and the Jeep JLU upper control arms say to torque to 75 pounds, so that's what I did. Now I'm going to start installing the outer shock mounts that Metalcloak provides. What I need to do is take this 10mm bolt out to release this brake bracket. Then I need to drill that out so it's a little bigger, and then there's a hole down here that I need to drill out. And then also for the bump stops, they say to drill this out to a 1/2 inch. I'm going to do that too. I don't think I'm going to install the bump stops today. I don't think she's going to need them, but in the future, if she goes bigger tires or anything like that, it'll be nice to have that done, and we'll be able to install the bump stops without actually taking the springs out. I have the holes drilled. This one was a pain. I had to go at it at an angle. I could have taken the caliper and everything off, but I didn't want to deal with all that. So I turned it out of the way as far as I could and then started drilling. I also have the one up here for the bump stop done. So now the bump stop bolt will fit in there for when we're ready to install the bump stops if we need to. Next, I'm going to install the outboard shock mount and then the shocks. For this one in here, Metalcloak provides a spacer that goes in there, and you're going to use the factory hardware. So I've got the upper shock mount installed. I don't have it tightened down yet, but I'm going to snip this out and line up the bottom. And then Metalcloak provides hardware for the bottom shock mount. Alright, so that was a little bit of a struggle to get that in there. The easiest way for me to do it was to actually droop the axle as far down as I could. And then it actually went right in. Okay, so I'm just going to go repeat the process on the other side. Alright, so one thing I realized is when I was going through the instructions, I must have skipped a page because I should have put the spring in before I put the shocks in. But that's fine because I do have a spring compressor and I actually got it in. It was pretty easy, really. Just not having the shocks there would have given me more room to be able to get it in there. But that went okay. So right now I'm just working on taking the spring compressor off. The other thing I wanted to mention is I didn't think Metalcloak gave the bottom spring isolator pad, but they do. I'm pretty sure when I got my lift they didn't include those, and I ended up buying those extra and installing them into mine so the spring would sit better. But in this kit they're included, so I'm using them. Alright, so we got the spring in on this side. We're going to move over and get the one in on the other side. The only thing I have left to do for the front is install the front track bar. I did have to make that oval right there a little bit larger to accept the bigger Metalcloak track bar for the front. And then when I'm done with that, we'll put the wheels on. I'll get Cindy to help me center the Jeep back over the axle.
One concern that we have is whether or not this sway bar link, this Apex Auto Links sway bar disconnect, is going to be too short now when disconnected. We may end up having to switch to the 10-inch. This is the 8-inch, but we're hoping not. We won't know until we get it out on some bumpy roads, get it fully articulated, and see if there's any issues.
I think Cindy and I were a little more optimistic on thinking we were going to get the whole thing done today. It just took a little longer with having to stop and do a little bit of filming. I don't know, maybe if I didn't film, I may still not have finished. But the front is done. Now I just got the back to do. The height on the front is a little exaggerated right now because all the weight is shifting to the back. But once I get the back lifted, some of that will shift back to the front. The front will level out where it needs to be. But I think this is going to work out really well for her. Got everything reset in here for tomorrow. Got my tools picked up. There's for the rear. Old parts for the front are right there. And we'll see you guys in the morning. Good morning, guys. I am going to finish installing the lift on Cindy's Jeep. Yesterday I finished the front. All I have left to do is the rear. It's not going to be nearly as involved as what the front was, so this should go fairly quickly. First thing I'm going to do is obviously lift up the rear of the vehicle, take the wheels off. I'll install the wheel spacers just like I did on the front yesterday, and then we'll start removing the stock components. And once that's done, we can start putting on the lift components. So we're going to get started on that and see if we can finish this up. So I got the wheel spacers on, and now I'm going to start on this assembly of the stock parts. First thing I'm going to do is take this plastic cover off, which will get me access to the shock bolt up here. Now you can see we got easy access up to that bolt. I'm just going to go take the one off the other side. Okay, I got the plastic pieces removed. The next step is remove the shocks. Then I'm going to loosen the brake line bracket, remove the track bar. Then I'm going to remove the sway bar links and then the factory coils. I've got the shocks removed on both sides. I got the brake line bracket removed. Now I'm ready to remove the track bar. It's a 21mm socket. It does have a flag nut on the opposite side, so just going to grab my impact and take that off. So the next step is removing the sway bar links. What you're going to need for that is on the top a 18mm wrench and a 6mm Allen head. And for the bottom you just need two 18mm wrenches. Okay, I got the sway bar links disconnected. Now I just need to remove the springs. So I'm going to droop the axle as far as it'll go and see if I can pull those out. So I've got all the factory parts removed and we're getting ready to start installing the 2.5-inch lift for Metalcloak. So I didn't do this with the front springs, but I wanted to compare the back ones I just got busy and forgot to compare the front ones. But you can see there's quite a bit of difference between the factory spring and the Metalcloak spring. And I got a tape measure here. And it's almost a 6-inch difference. So I've got the driver's side spring in. I'm getting ready to put the passenger side spring in. And then I do use the spring compressors. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to get them in there. So that's what we're getting ready to do next. I have both rear springs installed. Next, we're going to install the track bar. So the track bar is in. I'm not going to tighten anything down yet. I'm going to wait until I get everything else assembled and get the wheels back on, get it on the ground. Then I can measure from side to side and make sure we're centered. The axle centered, and then once we do that, we'll tighten everything down. Next, I'm going to move on to the sway bar. Metalcloak gives you some sway bar drop spacers, which we're going to install right underneath there. We're going to remove the factory hardware, put the spacer in between, and then use the hardware they provided to tighten them back up. We'll do that on both sides. Looks like they used a blue Loctite on there. We've got the drop spacers in for the sway bar. Next, we're going to install the sway bar links. I've already started on this one. The top, Metalcloak provides the hardware. This is 19 millimeter. This inner one's 17 millimeter. The bottom uses the factory hardware, which is going to be the 18 millimeter. Just need to tighten these up and then move on to the other side. I've got the sway bar links installed on both sides. The next thing I need to do is install the shocks. Now, I didn't mention this on the front, but they mentioned in the instructions you want to make sure this spacer is facing inward. And the same went for the front, and they also said to do it for the rear. So that's how I'm going to do it. And that's pretty much the last thing I need to do is put these shocks on, put the wheels back on, set it on the ground. The lift will be installed. I'm not going to tighten this top one up all the way yet. I'm going to leave it loose so I can work with it down here at the bottom to install it at the bottom mount. I'm going to tighten the top up and the shock will be installed, and we'll move over to the other side. One thing I almost forgot about is these plastic pieces right here. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall those. It's going to be easier to do with the wheels off. Alright, so I got the plastic pieces back on, and now I just need to jack it up and put the wheels back on. Cindy came out and looked at it. She's a little worried because it is pretty tall. It's only supposed to be a 2.5-inch lift, but man, I think it lifted it quite a bit more than that. But I really think it's going to settle once we start driving it and everything kind of bounces around a little bit. Those springs are going to settle and it's going to come down a little bit. I don't think it's going to be quite as high as it is right now. It's definitely going to help it for sure. When we had the factory springs on there, because of the weight in the back, you can see it was actually sitting on the bump stop. This was actually hitting, and that's not good. So we definitely needed to do something to get suspension back in this, and this lift is definitely going to do that, and I think she'll be happy with it overall. Well, there it is. Definitely made a big difference. It's off the bump stop now, so that's really good. Just got plenty of room now, plenty of suspension. Like I said before, that thing was riding right on the bump stop. I believe it will settle. But it looks pretty good. We just need to check the rear track bar, make sure the axle is centered, tighten everything up with that, and then give it a test drive, and then adjust the steering. Okay, so I do need to adjust the track bar. I measured and I got about 12 inches from what I measured to on the passenger side, and I got 13 inches on the driver's side. And you can even see this tire sticks out a hair further than what this one does. This one doesn't really stick out at all. So I need to move it about a ½ inch towards the passenger side. And I think I said that backwards. It actually needs to move a ½ inch towards the driver's side, not the passenger side. Okay, so I've got it even on both sides now. You can see the tire's just barely sticking out on this side. And I measured 12 3/4. And on this side, you can see it's sticking out just a little bit. And I got 12 3/4 on this side as well. And where I did is I just hooked the strap to here, over to the RV. That was the easiest way for me to do it. Maybe there's other ways, but this way worked for me. So the easiest way for me to get a consistent measurement is I went through the wheel over to the bump stop, and then I measured out to this edge of the wheel right here. And for me, that was the easiest way to stay consistent. And I got 12 3/4 inches on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the track bar and tighten everything up.
All right, so I measure what the height is now in the same way that I measured before Kevin put the lift kit on. This is my line from before. I measured to this edge right here, and I have a difference of 5 1/16 inch in the rear. In the front, it's 4 1/4 inch difference. So being that the Jeep had come down about 3 inches from stock height already, we now have it probably about 2 inches above stock height. So it's made a difference. It felt good driving it. Things are going to be a little harder for me to reach now, but I'll work that out. We won't really know until we get off road with this thing just how much of a difference it has made. So we are going to be doing that next weekend, and that'll be the next video. So I really appreciate that Kevin did this for me. Guys, give him a thumbs up. Let him know you appreciate he would do this for me as well. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you guys being here. Bye. See you next time.